AP Psych, this is Unit 7, Lecture 3, Work and Achievement Motivation. So this is the last part of the motivation chunk of the MESP unit, or the MESH unit, depending on what I remember to say. And so we've had our general motivation, our hunger and sex motivation, and now work and achievement. So what drives you to pursue a career? What drives you to do your chores? What drives you to do your homework, to set goals, and that sort of thing? That's what this one's all about. Okay, learning targets. Okay, so just generally speaking, to kind of introduce this idea, people have different attitudes towards work. And so if we're talking about like the work you're going to do after high school for the rest of your life, some people view it as simply a job to make money. Some people view how they spend their time as their career, a way to advance from one position to the other. And others view work as a calling. Now, I don't necessarily know that you need to take notes on these, but the different approaches affects your motivation. So if you're just looking for something to make money, if you're looking for something as a means to a higher goal, or because it really drives some sort of like destiny or motivation to contribute to the greater good, it's going to affect your motivation. Let's look at kind of the most basic level. An IO psychologist, or an industrial organizational psychologist, studies the workplace. And this can be broken down into two different subfields. The first one is personnel psychology. And if you think of like a personnel director, we typically mean someone in charge of hiring and firing people, like actually bringing people onto a job, a work site, and then possibly having to get rid of them or lay them off. So this person studies principles of selecting and evaluating workers. So they're also in charge of perhaps organizing the review process or evaluation process in terms of, are you doing a good job? Are you not doing a good job? What are your goals that you're setting? How are you achieving them? That sort of thing. An organizational psychologist studies how environments and management styles influence motivation, satisfaction, and productivity. So what is the best strategies to help workers communicate with one another, bosses to manage the people beneath them, to feel like their bosses respect them and are communicating well with them, and all of this with the goal of making the workplace the most productive it can to meet the goal it's striving for, whether it's teaching the kids or selling a product or designing the best new car, whatever the thing is. So what both of these fields and this category altogether has kind of found is that high performance and job satisfaction come by allowing workers responsibility and flexibility. So not so much micromanaging and not too many hard policies that can't be bent or adjusted, but really trusting your employees to do the things that you've asked them to do in the right ways. And perhaps not necessarily in the way that you, if you were the boss, you would do them, but still in a way that ends up meeting the goal that the company or business is looking for. What contributes the most to work motivation is kind of a broader label, and that is achievement motivation. So what drives you? What is your characteristic inside you in which satisfaction is obtained by striving for and attaining a level of excellence? That's kind of a wordy way to say what is your built-in desire for accomplishment, for mastering skills, for attaining a high level of those skills. And this field in general was researched extensively by a Harvard professor named David McClelland. And he contended that there are three things that people need to be motivated to accomplish some work or some sort of goal. And that is achievement in general. So to kind of be at the top or meet some sort of goal. For power and for affiliation. So feeling part of a group, feeling like you're in control of something, but that it varies based on your personality. And it's not just associated with something like an IQ test or a personality test, and that those are actually not great predictors of who will or won't make a good employee. There are two characteristics to achievement motivation that have high achievement motivation and low achievement motivation. High achievement motivation people are motivated by challenging tasks which can be completed successfully. So that sort of personality typically is looking for something that pushes them a little bit, but it's not too hard or too easy. So let's say you're just picking your courses for one of your high school classes, and as a freshman, you're not likely to jump right into AP Stats. I mean, even AP Psych, but we'll go with AP Stats because there's a whole lot more prerequisite knowledge you need to be able to be successful at AP Stats. That would be too hard. That would not be a reasonable fit unless you are some sort of mathematical genius. At the same time, you need to be pushed perhaps into something like geometry because maybe you did Algebra 1 in middle school. And so how do you find that just right spot where you feel challenged so you're not bored, but it's not so hard that you want to give up because what's the point? And then it translates into careers that someone can be competitive in and handle long-term goals to strive for. Low achievement motivation comes from a desire to avoid failure. Now this one's pretty interesting because this type of person is either going to choose very easy tasks that they know that they can accomplish or extremely difficult tasks because they know everyone's going to fail. So in both cases, they're not standing out. They're either guaranteed to do well. So look at me, I'm doing great and I can feel good about myself, or this is something everyone does great, so I don't feel like I stick out, or I'm going to pick something that we all fail at, so we all feel like silly together that we can't do this really hard thing. They actually avoid moderately difficult tasks for fear of failure. So they avoid those just right challenges because they feel that if they attempted something like that and then they still didn't do well, that it would be seen as an actual failure of their character because they weren't able to handle this thing that was the right level of difficulty. So on the definition slide, I talked about it being learned. Achievement motivation is learned in early childhood, especially from parents who push their children gently to try new and difficult tasks and allow them some level of independence. Give praise and rewards for success. If we think back to our development unit, we're trying to find that balance between encouraging a child to show independence and initiative without making them feel shame or guilt if they mess up. And then trying to help them find ways to succeed and not just allowing them to complain about their failures or making them feel bad about their failures. So any parent who can prompt their child to go on to the next level of more difficult challenge little by little by little can actually teach their child to have high achievement motivation. Culture can also play a significant role in developing someone's achievement motivation. So things like, think of your favorite children's book. I'm trying to think of one that I really liked. Amelia Bedelia. Did anyone read those? She was actually a housekeeper or a maid, but as she tried to do her job at the family's home that she worked in, she did really bizarre things. Like when she had to dress the turkey for the Thanksgiving book, she actually put a dress on the turkey. I thought it was hilarious. But anyways, in that book, it's all about what she achieved and whether or not she did a good job. So that, amongst numerous other books that I read growing up, it was about what an individual achieved. Also, just the overall view of what it means to be successful. So I have the question here, do we value achievement in the U.S.? How so? Without a doubt. Without a doubt, we do. If we think of someone who is successful, we generally think of an individual person who's at the top of their field, like the CEO or the MVP or a team captain. We don't always think of the team or all of the people that were behind that person. Sometimes we do, and sometimes we realize that they're there, but the credit, we tend to give credit to a certain individual. Other cultures don't agree with that and actually think Americans work too hard and worry about their career too much. And as long as you're making enough money to care for your family and take care of yourself, that's enough motivation. How is something like this determined or researched? Well, David McClelland, along with two other psychologists, Murray and Morgan, developed something called a thematic apperception test. And this is actually used to help not only research achievement motivation, but also help employers identify good employees. There's also another version that actually helps Psychologists research how people choose their mate, which is kind of interesting, but not here. We'll talk about that in another unit. So the thematic or apperception test, also known as the TAT, is given to people, and they're shown ambiguous pictures. So let's just say a boy that's sitting on a chair, like just daydreaming. And then that person who's looking at this picture is told to write a story. It will be scored on the amount of achievement images in a story. So if you're talking about that daydreaming boy, and then you say that he's dreaming about becoming the CEO of Google, and how he works really hard to get there, and so on, those are the sorts of things that someone who's evaluating this test will look for. It's a way to test your unconscious feelings onto an external stimuli. So trying to see what's going on deep into someone's mind or soul, by having them tell a story and then analyzing it, because that's something that's actually shared. Because it's often pretty hard for someone to just describe how they feel and to take it as valid. Like in a job interview, everyone's going to say that they're a hard worker and they're focused. No one's going to be like, I just want a paycheck, so what's the minimum I can get away with doing? I mean, good luck to you if you get away with that. And let me just add, we'll come across this term again. This is a type of projective test because you're projecting your feelings onto something else. So it's a way for psychologists to get a little insight into someone's inner thoughts. There are two types of motivation that a person might experience at any given time. Extrinsic motivation and intrinsic motivation. That X and that in will sort of help you determine what they are. So extrinsic is external of your body. You are doing something for a concrete, tangible reward. In other words, an incentive. While this is very common, it's very common to work for grades, to work for a salary, to work for that chocolate peanut butter cup or that chocolate ice cream. If you're only doing something for those reasons, it can undermine the quality and performance of your work. But if you do something intrinsically, like internally, because inside you, inside your mind, you're doing it because you enjoy it and you find satisfaction of it, you're more likely to work harder and produce higher quality work. Intrinsic motivation is actually really important, well, for everything, but I think about it a lot in school. If you are only doing something to get a good grade, you can satisfy whatever the teacher's asking for, make the product, the basic requirements that a teacher's asking for. But when it's over, if you haven't really learned something, kind of what's the point? So if you have intrinsic motivation to learn and you work hard and you produce high quality work, you'll often get that extrinsic reward, but you want your reason to be for the sake of learning. Or for me, I teach not for the paycheck, though it helps me survive my daily life. I do it because I really believe I'm good at it, and I do work hard at it, and I do feel like I see good results. The problem with intrinsic motivation is it can be ruined. It can be ruined by something called the over-justification effect. And this is when you reward someone for doing something that they already enjoy doing. And then if that reward is removed, you're going to lose your intrinsic motivation. So let's take the example of like a child who likes to read. If you're a child who really likes to read, and then all of a sudden you're entered into a reading contest where the most books you read gets you a Culver's custard coupon, you're likely to keep doing it because you're going to get that coupon. But then if that contest is over, you might not be so interested in continuing to read for fun anymore. College athletes seem to be more passionate about their sport than professional athletes. Now, yes, they might get a scholarship, but generally they're doing it because they still really love to play. It is helping them get an education. But then if they go up to the professional level and now they're getting paid, you're over rewarding something that they like to do anyways. And so if they're not getting paid what they think they should, or not getting paid at all, they're not going to be as interested in working hard on that talent or skill. So me as a teacher, I've always liked helping people learn, helping my friends with their homework. Yes, I am getting paid now to do it. But if they take my paycheck away, am I going to keep teaching for free? Probably not. The last subtopic of this lecture is motivational conflicts. So we are often forced into making choices between two different things that we want to do. So for example, right now I'm filming this lecture, but I also want to get outside and do some yard work. Choices. So we label, we have 4 different types of conflicts when we, that arise when we are conflicted in our motivation. The first one is the approach conflict. This is when we must choose between 2 equally attractive options. For example, going out on date night or hanging out with friends. Both are really good choices. But as the importance of the choice increases, so does the difficulty in making the decision. Is this your first date? Or is this hanging out with friends mark someone's birthday? The more important the hangout is, the difficulty in making that decision increases as well. If a friend says, hey, yeah, no problem, I'll catch up with you tomorrow, you go on that date and you see what kind of chemistry is out there, that's not a hard decision to make. Avoidance is the other somewhat easy one to define, and this is when you must choose between 2 equally unattractive options. For example, recording a lecture, we're going out to do yard work, but more likely vacuuming the house or mowing the lawn. Both are chores. This is also a difficult choice to make because they're both kind of like bad options and you just don't know what to do because they both are kind of crappy, but you gotta choose one. So that, to take it in a more serious example, maybe choosing to declare bankruptcy because you can't pay your bills for your house, and declaring bankruptcy helps you resolve some of those bills, or actually selling your house. So neither are ideal options. One puts you in a huge amount of debt, the other one gets you out of debt, but then you lose your house. So the more intense the stakes too, the more difficult it is to resolve those decisions. This next one's a little bit trickier because it's actually about a single thing. So you've got to make one decision, but there's both appealing and negative aspects to that decision. So let's say, for example, you're choosing who to go to prom with. So there might be pros to going to prom with an individual, and there might be cons to going to prom with that individual. This is difficult to resolve because there's good and bad aspects to the choice you need to make. Let's say it's telling a friend that you found out that his or her significant other has been cheating, or possibly been cheating. Let's go with possibly been cheating. On the one hand, if you tell your friend this, you might be protecting them from something. On the other hand, they could get really pissed at you and it might not be true, and now you've just tarnished a friendship. And so you might have these long stretches of time of indecision because you just don't know whether the pro or con, the positive or negative aspect, is going to win out. The final type is an extension of that previous approach avoidance type. Only this time, it's because you have too many choices with pros and cons to each. So in the previous approach avoidance, you're trying to make a single decision whether or not to act on it. Here, you might have several available alternatives, each with positives and negatives, and the types of positives and negatives could be wildly different from each other, so they don't really offset. So let's say you're trying to choose between universities, and you're looking at UW-Madison, Marquette, and UWM. On the one hand, maybe Madison has the appeal of being an hour away from home, and you get to kind of live in an area away from your friends and family and have some new independence. On the other hand, maybe your family are all Marquette alum and you feel like you should go there. On the other hand, maybe you know UWM's architecture program is top notch. So it's not even apples to apples. It's not like one thing equals the other and then one will cancel out the other. It's difficult to resolve because it's hard to compare the features when the pros and cons are so different from each other, but each are likely to be good choices. So in other words, there's no clear correct choice when you've got multiple choices. All right, that's it for this lecture. Hopefully you feel intrinsically motivated to get at the rest of your homework that you've got ahead of you, or your chores or your job or whatever it is. So you go get them, Popes, knock them dead.